Hey, how about them tops, son?
All day, SEC boys. SEC, they supposed to be SEC. Jersey all day, baby.
You're listening to the Red Out Podcast.
Hello and welcome into the Red Out Podcast. Special bonus here for you guys. We've just received news that Mike Sanford has been fired from the head coaching position at Western Kentucky University. So myself, Ross, and Jared are here to discuss our reaction to it, the record of his coaching career so far, and possible candidates we may see come into the head coaching position at Western. Ross, what was your reaction to the news today?
Honestly, I wrote the big article on the website and everything else, but I'm still surprised after the last 2 weeks' wins. I mean, I think it kind of caught me completely by surprise. I thought, though there's definitely some warts in both of the wins, they, came out, responded, and played well enough to, save his job based on that report. And the fact that, the day after that big emotional win that they pulled this off, I'm very surprised.
I am too. Jared, what's your take on it, buddy?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm kind of surprised after winning the last two games, like that report from Bowling Green Daily News talking about how if he won the last two games, he would probably save his job. But hey, it turns out, guess he didn't. But, if you look at his whole work that he's had at Western, it's been very subpar to what everyone was kind of expecting from him, which, obviously sucks. But I think Stewart made the right decision as far as, financially long-term because, so many of the fans already have their mind made up on how they view Sanford, and they don't really view him as a guy to be leading this team anymore. And you saw that at the senior night game against UTEP, the last game of the season at home. There was only barely 6,000 people that showed up to that. So Stewart knew that if he were to have kept him for next season going into that it would be financially a disaster. No ticket sales, a lot of sponsors pulling out and stuff like that. So I think this is probably going to be a good decision long term. It's debatable if Sanford would have done good next year or not. But, depending on who they get coming in, I think they have a real good shot to definitely get more than 3 wins next season.
I agree. I was completely blown away with the news today. I thought if it was going to happen, it would happen quick. But with all the positive, momentum he's gained from these past 2 wins, I kind of thought the same thing. I was like, well, I guess we're stuck with him for a third year. A lot of people were talking, hey, give this guy another year. They're doing good. And then I'm looking at it, and I've got family members I even argued with last night. I was like, you can't give him another shot because, he's making stupid mistakes. The fourth downs that Matt's written about on Towrack. Coaching decisions.
How many he passed for in the second half yesterday? It had to be less than 20.
I'm not sure off the top of my head, buddy. Let me see.
Duncan only finished with 92 yards. That's the only way. As great as the wins were the last 2 weeks, we still limped to wins in the second half. And, the things that we were all waiting for, like the turning of the page where the offense clicked and everything else, we still didn't even see that in those last 2 wins. So, to me, that's, you can sink your teeth and say, hey, the team came out, and also the 2 teams they played didn't show up those weeks either. So, kudos to the staff for winning those games. But, basically, hey, you bring him back in a do-or-die year, and you're just wasting progress, and, there's going to be a large chunk of the fan base that wasn't going to be happy with him back, that probably was going to turn their eye to their other allegiances or just not show up. This, hits the restart button, and, depending on who the hire is, I think, we can jump into the season and be really excited. So
I completely agree with that. I think, kind of like what you said, people are going to be turning their backs, and as hard as it is for fans to want to come out and watch games, you got to financially be thinking about, we've got to run this stadium and this program. And, the hard sell is, and a tough sell for people to believe, is that football is the driving force for universities a lot of times. And when you've got less than 6,000 fans at the stadium on senior night, that's really depressing. So you got to, and you got to look at the grand scheme of things, too. we had a rotating merry-go-round of quarterbacks all year, which was just frustrating for me to watch. But, I mean, there's countless reasons why it was a good decision on Stewart's part. But, and
plus looking just at the wins that we got this season, I mean, 2 of the wins that we got, Ball State and UTEP, I mean, both of those teams were really bad and were ranked in Tom Fernelli's bottom 25 teams. I mean, the La Tech win was the only one that I guess you could say is anything remotely close to impressive. But, you definitely have to win more games like Louisiana Tech in order to save your job, especially in the Conference USA, the way that it's kind of going now.
I mean, with La Tech, you were talking, Ross, a second ago that Duncan only had 92 yards. That's because we had 196 yards on the ground, with Samuel getting 71, Furby got 67, and Duncan himself almost got 30 yards. So it just goes to show how the defense for La Tech really wasn't there, and it kind of makes you question the strength of the Conference USA West, as far as that goes. Excuse me.
Yeah, because, UAB lost to MTSU in Murfreesboro yesterday.
Did they really? That's crazy.
Yeah, they got to be pretty bad, too, and they're going to be playing each other for the Conference USA title now, too.
Wow, that's a crazy thing for me. But, yeah. So, candidates, who are we thinking? Ross, I know you've got a big list piled up, so what do you got, buddy?
So I've seen just, quick Twitter and just scuttlebutt reactions and stuff. I've seen Nick Holt, Brian Brom, Tyson Helton. You're also hearing kind of crazy names like Hugh Freeze, Bobby Petrino again, and then there could be just some out of left field. I always like Matt Canada, but I don't know if Maryland's going to retain him or not. But those would be like the early names until we kind of hear more whispers about who's interviewing or not. So
I know that Bobby P is kind of a no for Western, but would it surprise you to? Yeah, I agree. Would it surprise you if he threw his name in the hat? Though, would it surprise you if it came out that his resume was in the hat?
It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think Todd Stewart's going to answer that call or even entertain him with an interview because, honestly, like Leo Peckinpah said, he kind of rubbed people the wrong way. It was the most hated man in the 100-year history of WKU while he was here. And
that's saying something.
If you watch Louisville play and how much their team gave up on him at the end or throughout the whole season, he's left that program in such ruins. It'd be just really hard to justify bringing him back, even though he is a name. So
I completely agree. I don't even think Willie T would come back to Western, as bad as that sounds.
He's getting plenty of money at FSU, whether he stays or gets bought out of his contract. He's going to be rolling in some money.
Which, surprisingly, I don't know how they ended up yesterday, but they're actually close to getting a bowl game. They had to beat Florida. They did lose. Oh well. I was going to say, if he beat Florida, then he was probably guaranteed a bowl, because that would have been a huge win for him.
Yeah, it definitely would have helped his cause a whole lot more. But, obviously, I think he's going to be back for a second year. But if he doesn't get them bowl eligible again next season, then his seat's going to be really hot. Because I think they said that this year was the first year Florida State hasn't been eligible for a bowl in, 30-something years. So that's saying something.
Jared, who do you consider possible candidates for the Western job?
What Ross said, all of the ones that he mentioned have kind of been thrown around a lot. I think are kind of feasible. The one I like the most probably is Travis Helton. I think he has a good shot at possibly coming back. As far as if he really wants to come back, that's something I don't really know. But the offense with him as the helm. With Brom, he did a really solid job. I really liked what he did. But we'll see. I don't know if there's going to be any people that kind of come out of the woodwork that we may not even be remotely close to thinking about, like some West Coast person or something like that. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of direction Todd goes, whether he gets someone like Hugh Freeze that's maybe had some of that big league experience that's looking to kind of get back on track, or hopefully not another new person entirely like Sanford was. But because I think that'd be bad, hiring another super young coach like that after you just fired one that didn't pan out after 2 years. I'd look for someone with a little more experience, maybe a little more leadership as well. But as playing or coaching at a higher level is something that could definitely be beneficial to the team next year.
I agree. Yeah, Tyson would be really good for Western, I think. Brian Braum, I've heard, I think you just mentioned his name. Another Braum wouldn't be bad as far as I'm concerned.
Ross needs to say what he thinks he should not be, though. I think.
Go ahead,
Ross.
I mean, here's the thing. You're moving on from Sanford, who obviously wasn't ready to be a head coach. Brian's only been an assistant for 3 years.
Okay.
And he's never called plays. I mean, if you look what made, Taggart and Braum as young up and coming coaches successful, they had been assistants for a while. They had worked their way up. Willie had put his blood and soul into Western and then went out to the West Coast and worked at Stanford for a couple years, and he was ready to take on that challenge. And even though it took him some time to get off the ground. Braum had been offensive coordinator at 7 stops and was finally, this was his chance to really shine at 43 or 44. Brian's only been under his brother's shadow. I mean, if somebody like Nick Holt wanted to bring him in as his offensive coordinator and let him call the plays, I'd love it. But as just a strictly, hey, let's turn the keys over to another 35 or younger person, I just don't think we should do that. That we might as well have kept Sanford if that was the case.
So I was going to say, you're expecting this to be exactly like Sanford. Him coming off
I would say exactly like Sanford, because he would still have the Braun pedigree, and you'd hope that he's learned enough from his brother's system for the last 3 years. But I think that when it comes to the small little details that really bog down Sanford at the end of the day, I think that's what you would be getting with Brian Braun. So I'd be fine. You brought in somebody like Nick Holt, who's probably got a chip on his shoulder, probably would stay here long term, blah, 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 which I don't like that either. I'm still more of hire a guy who's on the up as opposed to the guy on down. But, Nick Holt, and you bring Nick Holt with some Brian Ellis or Brian Braum or, one of the old offensive guys from the Braum era, then I'd be fine with it. You just gotta go back to the up tempo. You got to go with what works, and in Conference USA, you've got to score points. Your ceiling's not going to work. MTSU, they scored a bunch of points, and look, they're, God forbid they made the championship yesterday after, perennially being a all-Saran, because they came up and they decided, hey, we're going to put all our eggs into the high-scoring basket, and bam, they're playing for the championship next week. And that's what we did, the previous 2 years before Sanford.
Yeah, I mean, with Nick Holt, he's 56 years old, so that's kind of a big flip as far as things go. And I didn't realize he was Nicholas Holt the Fifth. Is that not funny or what? I think that would be a great pickup for Western. Love to see it. But I just thought that was really crazy news today, and I thought, you know what? Ross has kind of been pushing us to do a reaction podcast, so here we go. Why not?
Well, I think most of the fan base is going to be relieved. I think, you saw some of the people circling the wagons yesterday thinking that Sanford would come back, but I would say your average active fan that, you could have kept the diehards, you're going to stay with them through thick and thin regardless, but this is Todd Stewart saying, hey, I hear you. We can accept, the program slinking to this low, and we're going to make a move. So, we've got to applaud him on that. We've always said he can't bat 1,000 on hires, and it takes a good leader to realize, he messed up and he needs to change course before it's too late. So kudos to Todd Stewart.
Because if he would have kept Sanford and he would have started losing a whole bunch next season, then his seat would start be heating up too. But like, why didn't you just get rid of this guy after last season? So now he won't have to worry about that. He'll be kind of covering his end too, as far as moving on and making the right decision. Which, whether you think it's fair or not, some people have been arguing like, oh, Sanford won his last 2 games. He's showing improvement, but he should have had it long before November and long before against a lot of the teams that he played. There was a lot of games that we should have won, such as Maine, that those should have been wins, and for whatever reason we weren't able to get that. So I think just completely moving on and finding somebody new is going to be a good decision. But here's a question for you guys. Is there anyone on Western's coaching staff now that you would promote to head coach? Just hypothetical. Who would you pick if you had to choose somebody?
No. Honestly, no. I was talking last night, and that was an issue for me, was his coaching staff. His dad has been a Achilles heel for him him coaching special teams last year. He's coaching running backs this year. And surprisingly, running backs are doing better. But, it's one of those things.
The offensive line, he finally hired a real offensive line coach.
Exactly, yeah. They're actually, they're actually doing something. And I'm sorry, but Marquez Trigg was not, he was not the guy for us. And then, of course, you got Clayton, who, the defensive coordinator, isn't his name Clayton White, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what I thought. The motto, bend but not break. How many times have we given up almost 500 yards this season? Even against Ball State, we struggled, and we even won that game. And it was like, really? You didn't really hold anybody. And if Western's defense could have held Louisville, we would have won that game. But, I'll get off my soapbox because we don't have to worry about it.
Think about that. I went to the Louisville-Kentucky game yesterday, and that Louisville team was such a dumpster fire. And that could have been a signature win for Sanford. He wins that game. He wins Maine. He sits at 5-7. He only had himself to blame for losing his job at the end of the day.
Yep.
And if it takes an ultimatum saying you have to win the last 2 games for you to finally coach with some urgency, it's too late.
I agree. We heard that was an ultimatum that he had to win both, but does it really sound like an ultimatum that you got to win these next 2 to keep your job because he just lost his job anyway?
I think it was probably a motivational ploy to see what would happen, and there was still plenty of warts from those wins. It's not like they played, they still limped out of the half, didn't make second half adjustments. I think it might have been something, or it could have just been, just baseless speculation too. Maybe it was Stewart floating it out to the Bowling Green Daily News saying, okay, how's the fan base going to react to this? And I think we talked about it on the podcast. There was a whole segment of the fan base was like, why do these last 2 meaningless games matter when you've got 22 games of evidence to show that he's not the guy?
Yeah.
So I think maybe it was a thing to see the fan reaction, and then that's all he needed to know.
Yeah, I agree. It was it's kind of like what Matt and I talked about on the podcast this week or past week. He won 1 game and then he would lose 2. On average. So it was kind of like, really, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here. But I think it was a change. So, but this has kind of been a little short for you all. I hope you enjoyed. And we'll be having another episode later this week. Hope you all enjoyed this. And
check out the towel rack and
yes.
Keep watching. This should be fun. I think the fan base is going to be reinvigorated by this, and it's just a good day to we've moved on and now we don't have to worry about it anymore. So
exactly, it's always it's moving on, getting better coaching and hopefully a better program in the next few years. I think we're going to have to give the guy a year or so. At least a year.
He's going to get that liberty, though, too.
Yes.
He's going to, fans are going to buy in. If he goes 4-8, he's going to look better by comparison to Mike Sanford, and he's going to get he's going to be I guess Sanford had the bad fortune of being the guy after the guy, being the guy after Braum. The next coach is going to get the advantage of being the guy after the
train wreck, dumpster fire
program. So he's going to. I think next year the expectation will be 4 to 6 wins, and then, then we see what they can do. And maybe if what they said about Sanford's recruiting was right, maybe he did recruit some players that will really, be here for, who can really be building blocks. Who knows?
I completely agree. Jared, do you have anything to add, buddy?
I guess that you want to try to get someone that's got that good coaching experience, but I wouldn't want to try to get someone sort of like what Bobby P was when he came, as far as like trying to get back on track, just trying to get another higher up job like the year after they get hired. I think that'd be bad because we'd just be back in square one essentially, depending on what kind of coaching staff they bring in. But I think someone like Helton could work really good. It'll be really interesting to see which direction Todd goes, but I'm excited to see how this turns out. I hope to be able to make the press introductions and all of that whenever somebody's hired. We'll have that kind of content too, but we'll see.
Yep, follow the towel rack. I'm sure there's going to be articles coming out in the next few days as far as news and everything going, because they're always on top of it, doing content every day. So check it out, guys, and stay tuned. We'll have some coaching news hopefully in the next month or so, I guess. But as always, go Tops.
Go Tops.
Go Tops.